Hello guys and welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to give you some tips about watercolor. So let's get into the video. I just want to put it in there that I am going to be using a script today, so if I sound really different, this is why I'm not actually used to using a script. But let's get into what I'm supposed to be talking about. My first tip is about preventing watercolor from spreading. This happens to me a lot, as you may know if you watch my videos. So I have a couple of tips. My first tip, and probably the most important one, is when you're putting down colour, make sure that the colours beside the one you're going to put down are dry. If you're doing very small detailed spaces, try and reduce the amount of water you're using to avoid spreading too much. If you want a crisp, clean colour, make sure that the paper you're working on is dry. If it is slightly damp, the colour is going to spread, which can be a cool effect if you want it to, but not so fun if you really don't want it to spread. My next tip is about the supplies you're using. I'm not going to recommend any specific brands, but the paper you use is very important. You want to make sure the paper you use is a heavier weight paper. Better yet, use watercolor paper, but 120-pound paper is good. Something like mixed media paper. If you used sketching paper or printing paper, the paper will buckle with the water that you're using. You can do this if it's just sketches and it's not very important, but if you want this to be frameable or really high quality work, it's better that the paper you're using isn't going to buckle. You could experiment with using a different amount of water with the paint and it might work, but it's still going to buckle a little bit, so it's always better just to have the right paper that you need. You can also experiment with other supplies that you use with your watercolor. These don't strictly have to be art-related supplies. One example I found of this would be in Bernadette Banner's video on painting. She uses tea leaf and suggested salt and sand. I will leave her video up in the cards if you care to check that out. My next tip is going to be a little bit about blending. Now, at the beginning of my journey, I would mostly paint in acrylic, which to blend in acrylic, you need to have the two colours while they are still wet and can mix together. This is very similar to the way you have to work on watercolour. The main difference is that with watercolour, you can re-wet it to blend, but best results are when the two colours are still wet. This can be pretty annoying because watercolour dries quickly. Just make sure you add lots of water because that will help the blend be seamless. And try use colours that are close on the colour wheels to avoid muddy colours. That happens to me a lot. Actually, I believe it happened to me in my last video. I tried to blend orange and blue, which just didn't work. My last tip is going to be about the order that you put down the colour. As I said earlier, I used to work mainly in acrylic. With acrylic, the order that you put down the colours is that you start with darkest and you work your way up to the light colours. With watercolour, it is the opposite. You have to leave the white spots blank. Watercolour is very translucent, so you can't put the white colours in after. Start with the lightest colour and build up. Your shadows should go on last. I have been using watercolour for quite a few years now, and I have actually made mistakes, exactly these mistakes, multiple times. because I really not that clever in the fact that I forget these things and just keep repeating those things. Don't know why. But, so I've done this a lot, especially the wet watercolours when I don't want things to blend and it just doesn't look great. I did it right here. I put in the skin and the skin was still wet. Then I went in with the eye colour. Obviously, not the most attractive. I did manage to fix it kind of, but you can kind of still see where the blue had spread around of the skin colour. So if you like this painting, it looks best right now, or just after I put in a bit of the blush, which I'm not sure I did before or after the eyes, but looks best right now. After this, I messed up with the eyes and it just looks terrible. I also have had the mistake of putting dark colours on last and then putting on the white quite a few times, especially when I did water paintings in watercolour. So I then ended up just using acrylic on top of it, which you're probably not supposed to do, because then you can't go over acrylic with the watercolour, because acrylic is basically plastic based and then the watercolour just kind of rubs off. So I hope this isn't helped you in any way, and these tips stop you from making the same mistakes as I did. If you like this video and this format of me reading from the script, please like this video and